The Northern Ice corporate tower stood like a monument to power and precision in the heart of the financial district, its glass facade reflecting the city's skyline in perfect geometric patterns. On the 47th floor, Dale Winters adjusted his tie with mechanical precision, his fingers working the silk into a perfect knot without conscious thought. 6 years of serving as personal assistant to Marvin Blackthorne had taught him that perfection was not optional, it was survival. Dale was a beta in a world dominated by alpha energy, and he had learned early that his value lay not in the pheromones he couldn't produce or the submission he refused to display, but in his absolute, unwavering competence. While other betas cowered or postured around alphas, Dale simply worked. He anticipated needs before they were voiced, solved problems before they became crises, and maintained a professional distance that had become legendary throughout the building. Marvin Blackthorne was everything Dale was not. Where Dale was ice, Marvin was fire. Where Dale was precise, Marvin was explosive. The alpha's presence filled every room he entered like a living force, his pheromones so potent that even veteran employees still felt the instinctive urge to submit when he walked past. His dark hair was always slightly disheveled from running his hands through it during intense negotiations, his expensive suits somehow managing to look both perfectly tailored and slightly rumpled from his restless energy. But in 6 years of working together, Marvin had never once tried to dominate Dale. It was an unspoken agreement between them, a professional courtesy that had evolved into something deeper, though neither man would have admitted it. Dale didn't submit, Marvin didn't demand it, and somehow they had built the most effective partnership in the company's history. Dale, Marvin's voice carried across the executive suite, warm and commanding, but without the edge of dominance he used with everyone else. The Stormclaw delegation is here early. Conference room 3. Dale glanced at his watch, unsurprised to find that his internal clock had been correct. "I'll have the revised contracts ready in 10 minutes, he said, his voice carrying the same professional coolness it had maintained for 6 years. "The legal team is already in position." "What would I do without you?" Marvin asked, and there was something in his voice that made Dale's chest tighten unexpectedly. "Find another assistant," Dale replied without looking up from his computer screen. "Perhaps one who submits on command." Marvin's laugh was rich and genuine. Where would be the fun in that? The morning proceeded with its usual efficiency. Dale managed schedules, coordinated meetings, and fielded calls with the same calm precision that had made him indispensable. But there was something different in the air today, a tension that seemed to emanate from Marvin himself. The alpha was more restless than usual, his pheromones carrying an edge that made other employees give him an even wider berth than normal. The source of the tension became clear when Kashmir Valdez arrived for the afternoon meeting. Kashmir was an alpha from a rival company, known for his silver tongue and his ability to charm his way into any deal. He was also devastatingly attractive, with sharp cheekbones and eyes the color of storm clouds, and he had a reputation for being completely indiscriminate in his conquests. "Dale," Kashmir purred as he entered the reception area outside Marvin's office. "Still playing the Ice Queen, I see. Though I have to say, the professional look suits you." Dale looked up from his desk, his expression unchanged. "Mr. Valdez, Mr. Blackthorne is expecting you." "Always so formal," Kashmir said, moving closer to Dale's desk. "You know, most betas would at least pretend to be charmed by now." "I'm not most betas," Dale replied, his voice flat, "and I'm not paid to be charmed." Kashmir laughed, a sound like expensive whiskey. "No, you're paid to be competent, which you are extraordinarily so. It's quite attractive, actually." For the first time in the conversation, Dale felt something shift in his chest. Not submission, never that, but something warmer. Kashmir was flirting with him, and not in the condescending way most alphas did with betas. He was treating Dale like an equal, like someone worth pursuing rather than simply commanding. "Mr. Blackthorne is waiting," Dale said again, but his voice was softer now, and Kashmir caught the change immediately. "Of course he is," Kashmir said, his smile widening. "But perhaps after the meeting you'd join me for coffee? I'd love to hear more about your work here." Dale felt his lips curve in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Perhaps." From the inner office came the sound of a chair scraping against the floor, followed by Marvin's voice, sharper than usual. "Dale, send Mr. Valdez in. Now." The meeting that followed was tense in ways that had nothing to do with business. Dale could feel the alpha pheromones clashing even through the closed office door, could sense the barely controlled aggression radiating from both men. When Kashmir finally emerged an hour later, he was still smiling, but there was something predatory in his expression now. "That coffee," he said to Dale. "I'm more interested than ever." Dale nodded, surprising himself. "There's a place on 5th Street. Café Luna. 6 o'clock. "Perfect," Kashmir said, then leaned closer. "I have a feeling this is going to be very interesting." As Kashmir left, Dale became aware of a presence behind him. Marvin stood in the doorway of his office, his face carefully neutral but his scent heavy with something that made Dale's instincts prickle with warning. "Working late tonight?" Marvin asked, his tone conversational. "No more than usual," Dale replied, not turning around. "Is there something you need?" "Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow," Marvin said, but he didn't move away from the doorway. "Have a good evening, Dale." The coffee with Kashmir went better than Dale had expected. The alpha was charming without being overwhelming, intelligent without being condescending, and genuinely interested in Dale's thoughts on everything from literature to politics. For the first time in years, Dale felt himself relaxing in someone's company, felt the ice around his heart beginning to thaw just slightly. "You're not what I expected," Kashmir said as they walked back toward Dale's apartment building. "What did you expect?" "Someone broken down by years of working for an alpha like Blackthorn. Someone who had forgotten how to be themselves." Dale stopped walking. "And what makes you think I haven't?" Kashmir turned to face him, his expression serious. "Because you're here with me. Because you smiled at least 3 times tonight, and I don't think those were professional smiles." Dale considered this. "No, they weren't." "Good," Kashmir said, then surprised Dale by reaching out to brush a strand of hair from his face. "I'd like to see more of them." The touch was gentle, respectful, and it sent warmth spreading through Dale's chest. He hadn't realized how starved he was for simple human connection until this moment. "I'd like that too," Dale said quietly. The next few weeks developed a pattern. Kashmir would find excuses to visit the Northern Ice offices, always making time to chat with Dale, always treating him with the same respectful interest he had shown that first evening. They began having regular dinners, and Dale found himself looking forward to Kashmir's visits in a way that surprised him. Marvin, meanwhile, grew increasingly agitated. His pheromones carried a constant edge of aggression now, and he seemed to find fault with everything Dale did. Meetings that had once run smoothly now devolved into arguments. Schedules that had once been managed flawlessly now seemed to irritate him beyond reason. "This is wrong," Marvin snapped one Thursday afternoon, throwing a stack of documents across Dale's desk. "The Hartwell contract needs to be completely rewritten." Dale looked at the papers, then back at Marvin. "Sir, this is the 4th revision. The legal team has approved it, and it matches exactly what you requested yesterday." "Well, I'm requesting something different today," Marvin said, his voice carrying the edge of command that he had never used with Dale before. Dale felt his spine stiffen. "Of course, sir. I'll have it redone by tomorrow." "Tonight," Marvin said. "I want it tonight." "That's not possible," Dale replied, his voice cool. "The legal team has gone home, and the changes you're requesting require their input. Then call them back." Dale stood slowly, his movements deliberate. "Mr. Blackthorn, with respect, this is neither urgent nor reasonable. The contract is fine as written." "I'm not paying you to tell me what's reasonable," Marvin said, stepping closer. "I'm paying you to do what I ask." "You're paying me to do my job," Dale replied, not backing down. "Which includes telling you when you're being unreasonable." For a moment, they stared at each other across the desk. Dale could feel Marvin's alpha energy pressing against him, demanding submission, but he had never submitted before and he wasn't about to start now. "Fine," Marvin said finally. "Tomorrow morning. First thing." "Of course, sir," Dale said, his voice carefully neutral. The next day was Friday, and Kashmir had invited Dale to a diplomatic dinner being hosted by his company. It was a formal affair, full of important people and political undercurrents, exactly the kind of event Dale usually avoided. But Kashmir had asked him personally, and Dale found himself saying yes. "You look incredible," Kashmir said when he picked Dale up that evening. Dale had chosen a perfectly tailored black suit that brought out the sharp angles of his face and the pale blue of his eyes. "I'm going to be the envy of every alpha there." "I'm not an accessory," Dale said, but he was smiling. "No, you're not," Kashmir agreed. "You're much more interesting than that." The dinner was held in a private dining room at one of the city's most exclusive hotels. Dale found himself seated between Kashmir and a prominent Omega politician, engaged in a conversation about economic policy that was actually stimulating. For the first time in years, he felt like he was being seen as more than just an assistant, more than just a beta who happened to be competent. "You have fascinating insights," the Omega politician was saying. "Have you considered a career in policy work?" "I enjoy what I do," Dale replied diplomatically. "But surely you want more than just being someone's assistant," Kashmir said, his hand moving to rest on Dale's shoulder. "Someone with your intelligence and capabilities." Dale felt warmth spread from the point of contact. "I've never really thought about it." "You should," Kashmir said, his thumb brushing against Dale's neck in a gesture that was intimate without being inappropriate. "There are opportunities for someone like you." That was when Dale became aware of a new presence in the room. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees, and conversations began to falter as people turned to look at the entrance. Marvin Blackthorne stood in the doorway, his dark suit immaculate, his presence filling the room like a storm front. "Marvin," Kashmir said, his hand tightening slightly on Dale's shoulder. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Business," Marvin said. His eyes locked on the point where Kashmir's hand touched Dale's shoulder. "I was invited at the last minute." Dale felt the tension in the room ratchet up several notches. Other diners were beginning to notice the standoff, and he could see servers hesitating at the edges of the room, unsure whether to continue their duties or flee. "Dale," Marvin said, his voice carrying easily across the room. "I need to speak with you." "I'm off duty," Dale replied, not moving from his seat. "Whatever it is can wait until Monday." "No," Marvin said, stepping further into the room. "It can't." Kashmir's hand moved from Dale's shoulder to his back, a gesture of support and protection. "I think Dale has made his position clear." That was when Marvin snapped. Dale saw it happen in slow motion, saw the exact moment when 6 years of careful control shattered like glass. Marvin's alpha energy exploded outward, so powerful that several Omegas in the room whimpered and instinctively tried to hide. He crossed the room in 3 strides, his hand shooting out to grab Kashmir by the front of his shirt. "Get your hands off him," Marvin snarled, his voice carrying the full weight of alpha command. Kashmir didn't back down. "I don't think that's your decision to make." "Everything about Dale is my decision," Marvin said, and Dale felt something cold and sharp twist in his chest. "Is it?" Kashmir asked, his voice deadly quiet. "Did you ask him about that?" Marvin's response was to shove Kashmir backward. The alpha stumbled, knocking into a server carrying a tray of wine glasses. The sound of breaking crystal filled the room, followed by absolute silence. Dale stood slowly, his movements controlled despite the fury building in his chest. Every eye in the room was on him, waiting to see what the beta would do when faced with such a display of alpha dominance. He walked around the table, his footsteps echoing in the silence. When he reached Marvin, he stopped just close enough to be heard without raising his voice. "How dare you?" he said, his words carrying like ice crystals. "How dare you come here and make a scene? How dare you embarrass me in front of these people? And how dare you claim ownership of something you never asked for?" Marvin's face went pale. Dale's hand moved so fast that the sound of the slap echoed through the room before anyone realized what had happened. Marvin's head snapped to the side, a red handprint already blooming on his cheek. "You cannot claim what was never offered," Dale said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. You cannot own what you never asked to possess. He reached into his jacket and pulled out something that made several people in the room gasp. It was a small silver pin, the mark of a Deputy Alpha, given only to those who had earned the complete trust and authority of their Alpha partner. Dale had worn it for 3 years, and seeing it now, everyone in the room understood exactly what it represented. I resign, Dale said, placing the pin on the table in front of Marvin. Effective immediately. He turned to Kashmir, who was still standing where Marvin had shoved him, his face a mixture of shock and admiration. I apologize for the disruption. Please thank your host for the lovely evening. Then he walked out of the room, his back straight, his head high, leaving behind 6 years of his life and a room full of people who would never forget what they had just witnessed. Dale's apartment was a study in controlled minimalism. Clean lines, neutral colors, everything in its place. It was the opposite of the chaos he had just left behind, and he found himself grateful for the silence and order. He had never brought work home, never allowed Marvin's world to intrude on his personal space, and now he understood why. For the first time in 6 years, he was truly alone. The next morning brought flowers, at least a dozen different arrangements, all from Marvin. Dale donated them to the elderly woman who lived across the hall, who accepted them with delight and no questions asked. The calls started around noon, dozens of them, all from Marvin's office number. Dale let them go to voicemail, then deleted them without listening. He spent the weekend cleaning his apartment, organizing his personal affairs, and trying to figure out what came next. On Monday, he visited the bookstore below his apartment building, a small independent shop that specialized in rare books and literary fiction. The owner, an elderly man named Henry, had been talking about needing help with his inventory for months. You want to work here? Henry asked, looking surprised. Isn't this a bit of a step down from corporate life? It's different, Dale said. I think I'd like different. Henry hired him on the spot, and Dale found himself settling into a routine that was both foreign and comforting. The bookstore was quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where time moved differently. He spent his days organizing inventory, helping customers find exactly the right book, and slowly rediscovering parts of himself that had been buried under years of professional efficiency. It was on a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after he had left Northern Ice, that Kashmir found him. I've been looking for you, Kashmir said, appearing in the poetry section where Dale was shelving new arrivals. Dale looked up, surprised. How did you find me? I have my ways, Kashmir said with a smile. I wanted to check on you. That night at the dinner, you disappeared before we could talk. There wasn't much to talk about, Dale said, returning to his shelving. I was embarrassed, and I needed to leave. You were magnificent, Kashmir said seriously. I've never seen anyone stand up to an alpha like that. Dale felt heat rise in his cheeks. It was unprofessional. It was necessary, Kashmir corrected. He was out of line, and you put him in his place, and lost my job in the process. Did you want to keep it? The question caught Dale off guard. I don't know. I'd never really thought about it. Well, now you have time to think, Kashmir said. And when you're ready, I have a proposition for you. Oh, my company is expanding. We need someone to head up our new policy analysis division. Someone with your skills, your intelligence, your ability to see through corporate nonsense and get to the heart of issues. Dale set down the book he was holding. Kashmir, I appreciate the offer, but don't answer now, Kashmir said, holding up a hand. Think about it. Talk to Henry. Talk to yourself. Figure out what you want your life to look like. But know that the offer is there when you're ready. After Kashmir left, Dale found himself unable to concentrate on his work. The offer was tempting, more tempting than he wanted to admit. It would mean leaving behind the quiet peace of the bookstore, but it would also mean building something new, something that was his own choice rather than something he had fallen into. That evening, he was closing up the shop when he noticed a figure standing across the street. Even in the fading light, he recognized the silhouette immediately. Marvin had been waiting for him. Dale finished locking up and crossed the street, his movements deliberate and unhurried. Stalking me now? He asked when he reached Marvin. Trying to apologize, Marvin said, and Dale was surprised by how rough his voice sounded. I've been trying to apologize for 2 weeks. I deleted your messages. I know. I deserve that. Dale studied Marvin's face in the lamplight. The alpha looked exhausted, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his scent carried notes of stress and something that might have been desperation. Say what you came to say, Dale said. I was wrong, Marvin said immediately. I was wrong to make a scene, wrong to embarrass you, wrong to act like I owned you. I was wrong about everything. Yes, you were. I miss you, Marvin continued, his voice breaking slightly. The office is chaos without you. I can't function without you. I need you to come back. Dale felt something twist in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. You need an assistant. Hire someone else. I don't want someone else. I want you. Why? The question seemed to catch Marvin off guard. Because you're the best at what you do. Because you understand how I work. Because I'm useful to you, Dale said, cutting him off. Because I make your life easier. Yes, Marvin said, then immediately seemed to realize his mistake. No, that's not. I mean, yes, you do, but that's not why. Go home, Marvin, Dale said, turning away. Find another assistant. Find someone who will submit when you demand it. Find someone who will be what you need them to be. I don't want someone who submits, Marvin called after him. I want someone who challenges me. I want someone who stands up to me. I want someone who sees me as more than just an alpha. Dale stopped walking but didn't turn around. Then you should have said that 6 years ago. I'm saying it now. Dale did turn around then, and the expression on his face made Marvin take a step back. 6 years too late. The next morning brought a package to Dale's apartment. Inside was a leather portfolio, the kind used for important documents. But when Dale opened it, he found something unexpected. It was full of handwritten notes, observations, and sketches. Marvin's thoughts on various business deals, his strategies for difficult negotiations, his analysis of market trends. Personal insights that went far beyond anything he would have shared with a typical assistant. At the bottom of the portfolio was a note in Marvin's handwriting. You were never just my assistant. You were my partner in everything. I should have told you that years ago. I should have asked you to be more than just someone who worked for me. I should have asked you to be with me. Dale set the portfolio aside and tried to return to his normal routine, but the words echoed in his mind throughout the day. The bookstore customers seemed to notice his distraction, and Henry finally sent him home early. You're thinking too hard, Henry said kindly. Go home, have a drink, figure out what's eating at you. That evening, Dale sat in his apartment with the portfolio open in front of him, reading through years of Marvin's private thoughts. The insights were brilliant, showing a depth of understanding and strategic thinking that went far beyond what Dale had realized. But more than that, they showed trust. Marvin had shared these thoughts with him, had valued his input and perspective in ways that he had never explicitly acknowledged. Dale was still reading when his phone rang. He almost didn't answer, assuming it was another call from Marvin's office, but the caller ID showed Kashmir's name. Dale, thank God. Kashmir's voice was tight with urgency. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. What's wrong? The Stormclaw Pack Alliance. The one Northern Ice has been negotiating for months. Do you know anything about the final terms? Dale frowned. Why are you asking? Because they're about to sign a deal that's going to destroy both packs. The terms are insane, completely one-sided, and Blackthorn is walking into a trap. My sources say he's lost his edge, that he's making decisions based on emotion rather than logic. Dale felt his stomach drop. How bad is it? Bad enough that it could mean the end of Northern Ice as an independent pack. And possibly the end of Blackthorn himself. Dale closed his eyes, his mind racing. When is the signing? Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. I have to go, Dale said, already reaching for his clothes. Dale, wait. But Dale had already hung up. He dressed quickly, his movements sharp and efficient. The portfolio sat open on his table, Marvin's handwritten notes a reminder of everything they had built together, everything that was about to be destroyed. The Northern Ice building was almost empty when Dale arrived, just a few security guards and cleaning staff. But he still had his keycard, and muscle memory carried him through the familiar corridors to the executive floor. Marvin was in his office, surrounded by papers and looking like he hadn't slept in days. He looked up when Dale entered, his face cycling through surprise, hope, and something that might have been relief. "Dale," he said, starting to stand. "Sit down," Dale said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 6 years managing Marvin's professional life. "We need to talk about the Stormclaw deal." For the next 3 hours, they worked together the way they had for 6 years. Dale spread the contract documents across the conference table, his sharp eyes catching details that Marvin had missed in his exhausted state. He pointed out clauses that were problematic, terms that were disadvantageous, and loopholes that could be exploited. "Here," Dale said, highlighting a section in the middle of the contract. "This clause about territorial rights. It looks standard, but combined with this section about resource sharing, it essentially gives Stormclaw control over your northern territories." Marvin leaned over to look at the document, and Dale caught his scent, familiar and warm despite everything that had happened between them. "How did I miss that?" "Because you're exhausted and distracted," Dale said bluntly. "When's the last time you slept?" "I don't remember." "When's the last time you ate?" Marvin's silence was answer enough. Dale sighed and reached for his phone, ordering food from Marvin's favorite restaurant with the easy efficiency of someone who had done it countless times before. "You don't have to," Marvin started. "I'm not doing it for you," Dale said, not looking up from the contract. "I'm doing it because I can't work with someone who's about to collapse from exhaustion." They worked in silence after that, the familiar rhythm of their partnership reasserting itself despite everything that had passed between them. Dale caught problems, suggested solutions, and reorganized the entire structure of the deal. Marvin provided context, made strategic decisions, and slowly began to look like himself again. By dawn, they had a completely revised contract, one that was fair to both PAX and protected Northern Ice's interests. Dale felt the satisfaction of a job well done, the same feeling that had sustained him through 6 years of working with Marvin. "This is good work," Marvin said, reviewing the final draft. "Better than good. This is the kind of deal that could set a new standard for PAC alliances." "It's what we do," Dale said, then caught himself. "What you do?" "No," Marvin said quietly. "What we do. What we've always done." Dale felt something shift in his chest, a familiar warmth that he had been trying to ignore for weeks. "Marvin, I know you're not coming back," Marvin said quickly. "I know I ruined everything, but I need you to know that these 6 years, working with you, building this with you, it's been the best part of my life." Dale looked at him across the conference table, this alpha who had shaped his world for 6 years, who had trusted him with everything and never once tried to dominate him. "I'm not coming back to work for you." Marvin nodded, his face carefully neutral. "I understand. But I'm not leaving the PAC," Dale continued. "I've been away from my obligations long enough. Kashmir was right about one thing. I have skills that could be useful in other ways." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'm going to accept the position as PAC advisor. Direct report to the council, not to you. My own office, my own staff, my own authority." Marvin's face lit up with hope. "Dale, that's—" "I'm not doing it for you," Dale said firmly. "I'm doing it for the PAC, for the work itself, because I'm good at it, and because it matters." "Of course," Marvin said, but his smile was brilliant. "Whatever your reasons, I'm glad you'll be here." "There will be conditions," Dale said. "Anything. We work together professionally, but we maintain appropriate boundaries. No more possessive displays, no more claiming ownership of things you were never given. And no more taking me for granted." "Agreed," Marvin said immediately. "And if you ever embarrass me in public again, I will not just resign. I will make sure everyone knows exactly why." "Understood." Dale packed up his notes, his movements efficient and professional. "The Stormclaw meeting is in 3 hours. I suggest you get some sleep first." Dale, Marvin called as he reached the door. Thank you for coming back, for saving the deal, for everything. Dale paused with his hand on the doorknob. I didn't come back for you, Marvin. I came back for the pack. I know, Marvin said softly, but thank you anyway. The next few months established a new dynamic between them. Dale took over as pack advisor, a position that gave him authority over strategic planning and external relations. He had his own office, his own staff, and his own sphere of influence. He worked with Marvin on major decisions, but as an equal partner rather than a subordinate. It should have been perfect, but Dale found himself struggling with feelings he had been suppressing for years. Working closely with Marvin again, seeing his intelligence and passion and dedication, reminded him of all the reasons he had stayed in an impossible situation for so long. You're miserable, Henry observed one evening when Dale stopped by the bookstore after work. I'm fine, Dale said automatically. You're miserable, Henry repeated. You got what you wanted, didn't you? Independence, respect, equal partnership. So why do you look like someone killed your dog? Dale sank into one of the reading chairs, suddenly exhausted. It's complicated. It's not complicated, Henry said gently. It's love. You're in love with him, and you're trying to pretend you're not. I can't be in love with him, Dale said. He's an alpha. I'm a beta. He's my colleague. It's inappropriate on every level. Says who? Says everyone. Says society. Says 6 years of professional boundaries. Forget society, Henry said dismissively. Forget professional boundaries. What do you want? The question hit Dale like a physical blow. What did he want? He had spent so many years being what other people needed him to be that he had forgotten to ask himself what he actually wanted. I want him to see me, Dale said quietly. Not as his assistant, not as his advisor, not as useful. I want him to see me as someone worth choosing. And has he? Dale thought about the portfolio of private notes, about the trust Marvin had shown him, about the way he had looked when Dale had walked out of the diplomatic dinner. I don't know. Maybe. But it doesn't matter. Why not? Because I was never his to begin with. He never asked me to be. So ask him to ask you. Dale stared at Henry. What? You heard me. Ask him to ask you. Stop waiting for him to figure it out on his own. Alphas are not known for their emotional intelligence, especially not when it comes to matters of the heart. That night, Dale lay awake thinking about Henry's words. Was it really that simple? Could he just ask Marvin to choose him? The idea was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. The next morning brought a new crisis. The Winterhold pack was threatening to break their alliance over a territorial dispute, and the situation was escalating rapidly. Dale and Marvin spent the day in emergency meetings, trying to find a solution that would satisfy all parties. We need to send a negotiation team, Marvin said during a brief break between calls. Someone who can handle the politics without making things worse. I'll go, Dale said immediately. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. If negotiations break down, they might take hostages. I'm the best negotiator we have, Dale said firmly. And I'm not some fragile flower that needs protection. I know that, Marvin said, running his hands through his hair. But I can't send you into a situation where you might get hurt. It's not your decision to make, Dale said. It's mine. They stared at each other across the conference room, the same battle of wills that had defined their relationship for years. But this time, there was something different in Marvin's eyes, something that looked like fear. Please, Marvin said quietly, don't ask me to send you into danger. I'm not asking you to send me, Dale said. I'm telling you I'm going. In the end, they compromised. Dale would lead the negotiation team, but Marvin would come as backup, staying close enough to help if things went wrong. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than the alternative. The Winterhold pack's territory was in the mountains, accessible only by a narrow road that was treacherous even in good weather. By the time they arrived at the negotiation site, a small cabin that sat on the border between territories, snow had begun to fall. Looks like we might be here longer than expected, Marvin said, eyeing the darkening sky. The negotiations were difficult from the start. The Winterhold Alpha was young and angry, convinced that Northern Ice was trying to steal his territory. His advisors were older and more experienced, but they seemed content to let their Alpha make his own mistakes. Dale spent hours presenting alternatives, offering compromises, and trying to find common ground. But as the day wore on, it became clear that the Winterhold pack wasn't interested in reasonable solutions. They wanted a fight. "I think that's enough for today," Dale said finally, as the snow outside began to fall more heavily. "Perhaps we should continue in the morning." "There won't be a morning," the Winterhold Alpha said. "Not for you." The threat was clear, and Dale felt Marvin's tension spike behind him. But he kept his voice level, his posture relaxed. "I'm sure you don't mean that. I mean exactly that. You came here to steal from us, and you'll pay the price." "We came here to find a peaceful solution," Dale said. "But if you're not interested in peace, we'll be going now." "No," the Winterhold Alpha said, standing up. "You'll be staying here until you agree to our terms." "That's not how negotiations work," Dale said calmly. "It's how they work now." That was when Marvin stepped forward, his alpha energy filling the room like a physical presence. "You have 3 seconds to apologize to my advisor and open that door." "Your advisor?" The Winterhold Alpha laughed. "This beta belongs to you?" "Dale belongs to no one," Marvin said, his voice deadly quiet. "But he is under my protection, and if you threaten him again, you'll deal with me." "Is that a challenge?" "It's a promise." The standoff lasted for long minutes, alpha energy clashing in the small space. But eventually, the Winterhold Alpha backed down, perhaps recognizing that Marvin was older, more experienced, and absolutely serious about his threat. "Fine," he said. "Leave. But don't come back." "Gladly," Dale said, gathering his papers with calm efficiency. The drive back down the mountain was harrowing. The snow was falling heavily now, and the narrow road was becoming increasingly treacherous. Halfway down, they encountered a tree that had fallen across the road, blocking their path. "We'll have to go back," Marvin said. But Dale was already shaking his head. "Look at the road behind us. It's already impassable. We're stuck here until the storm passes." Marvin pulled out his phone, but there was no signal. They were truly stranded. "There's an emergency shelter about a mile back," Marvin said. "Basic supplies, but it should keep us alive until rescue arrives." The shelter was a small log cabin, designed for exactly this kind of situation. It had a fireplace, basic food supplies, and 2 sets of bunk beds. What it didn't have was heat, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. "I'll get a fire started," Marvin said, moving toward the fireplace. Dale began organizing their supplies, his movements efficient despite the cold. They had enough food for several days, but the temperature was going to be a problem. The cabin was well built, but it was still going to be freezing. "Fire's going," Marvin announced, and Dale felt a wave of relief as warmth began to spread through the small space. They ate in silence, both of them aware of the tension that had been building between them for months. Finally, as the fire died down to glowing embers, Dale broke the silence. "We need to talk about what happened up there." "What about it?" "You said I was under your protection." "You are. All my advisors are." "That's not what you meant, and we both know it." Marvin was quiet for a long moment. "No, it's not what I meant." "So what did you mean?" "I meant that you're important to me, more important than anyone else. And the thought of someone hurting you makes me want to tear them apart." Dale felt his chest tighten. "Marvin, I know it's not fair to you," Marvin continued. "I know I have no right to feel possessive about someone who doesn't belong to me, but I can't help how I feel. You could ask me to belong to you." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Marvin turned to stare at Dale, his eyes wide with surprise. "What?" "You could ask me," Dale repeated. "You could ask me to be yours, not as your assistant or your advisor, but as your partner, your equal, your choice." "Dale, But you have to ask," Dale said firmly. "You can't just assume. You can't just claim. You have to ask me to choose you, and you have to accept that I might say no." Marvin was quiet for a long time, staring into the dying fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I'm afraid. Of what? Of asking and having you say no. Of losing you completely. You already lost me, Dale said gently. You lost me the night you made a scene at the diplomatic dinner. You lost me when you acted like you owned something you never asked for. I know, but you could win me back. If you asked the right way. Marvin turned to face him fully, his expression serious. How? How do I ask the right way? You ask me to be with you because you want me, not because you need me. You ask me to choose you because you think I'm worth having, not because I'm useful to you. And you ask me knowing that I might say no, and you respect that choice. And if I ask that way, if I ask you to be with me not because I need an assistant or an advisor, but because I want a partner, if I ask you to choose me not because it's convenient, but because you want to be chosen, what would you say? Dale looked at him across the small space, this alpha who had shaped his world for 6 years, who had trusted him and challenged him and never once tried to break him. Ask me and find out. Marvin took a deep breath, his hands shaking slightly. Dale Winters, will you be my partner? Not my employee, not my subordinate, but my equal in everything. Will you choose to be with me, knowing that I'm probably going to make mistakes, knowing that I'm learning how to be with someone instead of just commanding them? Will you take a chance on me, on us, on whatever we could build together? Dale felt tears prick at his eyes, but his voice was steady when he answered. Yes. The kiss that followed was nothing like the passionate embraces in romance novels. It was tentative, careful, full of 6 years of suppressed longing and the fear of ruining something precious. When they broke apart, both men were shaking. I've wanted to do that for so long, Marvin whispered. Why didn't you? Because I was afraid you'd leave. I did leave, Dale pointed out. And I came back. Why? Because I love you, Dale said simply. I've loved you for years. But I couldn't be with someone who saw me as property instead of a person. I couldn't be with someone who took me for granted. I'll never take you for granted again, Marvin promised. See that you don't, Dale said, but he was smiling. They spent the rest of the night talking, really talking, for the first time in years. They talked about the mistakes they had made, the assumptions they had lived with, the future they wanted to build together. They talked about boundaries and expectations, about the difference between love and possession, about what it meant to choose each other every day. When rescue arrived the next morning, they were found asleep in each other's arms, the fire long since burned out but neither of them cold. The return to the city marked the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship. They took things slowly, learning how to be partners in love as well as work. Dale kept his position as PAC advisor, but he also moved back into the executive suite, sharing the space with Marvin as an equal. The PAC adjustment was surprisingly smooth. Most people had suspected their feelings for years, and seeing them together as genuine partners rather than alpha and subordinate seemed to make everyone more comfortable. You're happier, Henry observed one evening when Dale stopped by the bookstore. I am, Dale agreed. I'm exactly where I want to be, with exactly who I want to be with. And he's treating you right? He's treating me like an equal, Dale said. Like someone worth choosing every day. Good, Henry said with satisfaction. That's all anyone can ask for. 6 months later, the Northern Ice Pack held its full moon ceremony in the main conference room of the corporate building. It was an old tradition, one that had been adapted for modern PAC life but still carried the weight of ancient customs. PAC members, Marvin began, his voice carrying easily through the room. We gather tonight to celebrate our bonds, our unity, and our strength. But before we begin the traditional ceremonies, I have an announcement. The room fell silent, everyone's attention focused on their alpha. 6 years ago, I was given a gift, Marvin continued, a partner whose intelligence, dedication, and strength made me a better leader and a better man. For too long, I took that gift for granted. I assumed that competence meant contentment, that service meant satisfaction. Dale felt heat rise in his cheeks as he realized where this was going. I was wrong, Marvin said, his eyes finding Dale's across the room. Partnership isn't about taking what's freely given. It's about choosing to give and being chosen in return. He stepped down from the small platform, moving through the crowd until he stood directly in front of Dale. "Dale Winters," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "I am not asking you to serve me. I am not asking you to submit to me. I am asking you to choose me as I choose you. I am asking you to be my partner not because I need you, but because I love you. I am asking you to build a life with me based on equality, respect, and the choice we make every day to be together." Dale felt the attention of the entire pack focused on him. But for once, he didn't feel the need to hide or deflect. This was his moment, his choice, his chance to claim what he wanted. "Marvin Blackthorne," he said, his voice clear and strong. "I was never yours by right or by conquest. I was never yours because I had no choice. But I choose to be yours now because you asked me to choose. Because you see me as someone worth choosing. Because you love me enough to give me the power to say no, which makes my yes mean everything." The applause that followed was thunderous, but Dale barely heard it. All his attention was focused on Marvin, on the joy and relief and love in his eyes. "I love you," Marvin said, just loud enough for Dale to hear. "I love you too," Dale replied. "And I choose you, every day, for as long as you'll have me. Forever." "Then," Marvin said, and kissed him in front of their entire pack. 1 year later, Dale woke up in their shared apartment, sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked the city. Marvin was already up, making coffee in the kitchen, his hair still messed from sleep. "Good morning," Marvin said, handing Dale a cup prepared exactly the way he liked it. "Good morning," Dale replied, accepting the coffee and the kiss that came with it. It was a domestic scene that would have been impossible to imagine 2 years ago, when Dale was still hiding behind professional boundaries and Marvin was still assuming that competence meant contentment. Now, they were simply two people who had chosen each other, who continued to choose each other every day. "What's on the schedule today?" Dale asked, settling into the chair across from Marvin at their small dining table. "The usual chaos," Marvin said with a grin. 3 meetings, 2 conference calls, and 1 very important anniversary dinner." "Anniversary dinner?" 2 years since you quit in spectacular fashion and changed both our lives forever." Dale smiled, remembering that night at the diplomatic dinner, the moment when he had finally stood up for himself and walked away from everything he had known. "Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Marvin corrected. "What was the first?" "Choosing to come back. Not to me, but to yourself. To what you wanted instead of what you thought you should accept." Dale reached across the table and took Marvin's hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "I choose you," he said, the words that had become their daily affirmation. "Not because I have to, not because it's expected, but because I want to." "And I choose you," Marvin replied, "for exactly who you are, not for what you can do for me." Outside their window, the city was waking up, full of people starting their days, making their choices, building their lives. But inside their apartment, Dale and Marvin were content to sit together in the morning light, two people who had learned that love wasn't about possession or submission, but about the daily choice to see each other clearly and choose each other anyway. "Ready to face the day?" Marvin asked eventually. "Ready," Dale said, and meant it. He was ready for whatever came next, as long as they faced it together, as equals, as partners, as two people who had chosen each other freely and completely. The ice and fire that had once seemed so incompatible had found their balance, creating something stronger and more beautiful than either could have achieved alone. And every morning they chose to keep that balance, chose to keep building their life together, chose to keep loving each other exactly as they were. 2 years into their official partnership, both personal and professional, Dale and Marvin had settled into a rhythm that worked for both of them. The pack had grown under their joint leadership, expanding into new territories and forming alliances that strengthened their position in the complex web of interpack politics. Dale's strategic mind and Marvin's natural leadership created a combination that other packs both respected and envied. But success brought its own challenges. The larger northern ice became, the more attention they attracted from rival packs and government agencies interested in regulating supernatural communities. Dale found himself spending more time in meetings with federal liaisons and supernatural rights advocates, while Marvin dealt with territorial disputes and resource negotiations. "We need to talk about the Silver Peak situation," Dale said one evening as they reviewed reports in their shared office. The Silver Peak Pack had been making aggressive moves toward Northern Ice territory, testing boundaries and challenging their authority. "What kind of talk?" Marvin asked, looking up from his own stack of documents. "The diplomatic kind or the show them our teeth kind? The kind where we acknowledge that we're dealing with an alpha who sees our success as a personal insult," Dale said, setting down his pen. "Marcus Silverpeak has been looking for an excuse to challenge you for years. Our expansion into the Eastern Territories gave him one." Marvin leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "You think he's going to call for a formal challenge?" "I think he already has. The pack elders received the formal notification this morning." Dale watched as the implications sank in. A formal alpha challenge was serious business, with rules and traditions that went back centuries. It wasn't just about Marvin's leadership of Northern Ice. It was about pack honor, territorial rights, and the complex hierarchy that governed their world. "When?" Marvin asked. "Full moon. 3 weeks from now." "Traditional combat?" "He's demanded it. Single combat. No interference. Winner takes all." Marvin was quiet for a long moment, his hands steepled in front of him. Dale could see him running through possibilities, weighing options, calculating risks. It was the same expression he got during complex business negotiations, but the stakes here were infinitely higher. "What are you thinking?" Dale asked. "I'm thinking that Marcus Silverpeak is an idiot if he thinks he can take our territory through single combat," Marvin said. "But I'm also thinking that this isn't really about territory." "No," Dale agreed. "It's about you, about us, about the fact that you chose a beta as your partner and advisor, and that threatens his worldview. Threatens his ego, more like," Marvin said with a growl. "He's never forgiven me for refusing his daughter's courtship proposal 5 years ago." Dale remembered that situation well. Elena Silverpeak had been beautiful, intelligent, and entirely unsuitable for Marvin in every way that mattered. The rejection had been handled with perfect diplomatic courtesy, but Marcus had taken it as a personal slight against his family's honor. "So what do we do?" Dale asked. "We prepare," Marvin said simply, "and we make sure that when this is over, there's no question about who leads this pack." The next 3 weeks were a blur of preparation and planning. Marvin began training with the pack's combat specialists, honing reflexes and techniques that he hadn't needed to use in years. Dale threw himself into research, studying Marcus Silverpeak's fighting style, his weaknesses, his psychological profile. But beneath the surface preparations, both men were dealing with deeper fears. The possibility that Marvin might lose, that everything they had built together might be destroyed, hung over them like a storm cloud. "I need you to promise me something," Marvin said one evening as they walked through the pack's territory, checking security arrangements for the upcoming challenge. "What kind of promise?" "If something happens to me, if the challenge goes wrong, I need you to get out. Take whatever you can carry and disappear. Don't try to negotiate with Marcus. Don't try to bargain for the pack's safety. Just run." Dale stopped walking. "Absolutely not. Dale, be reasonable. If Marcus wins, you'll be his first target. He'll see you as a symbol of everything he hates about my leadership." "Then I guess you'd better not lose," Dale said firmly. "I'm serious. So am I. We're partners, Marvin. In everything. That means we face whatever comes next together." Marvin turned to face him, his expression pained. "I can't protect you if I'm dead." "You're not going to die," Dale said with a certainty he didn't entirely feel. "Because I won't let you. Because we're stronger together than apart. Because you have something to fight for that Marcus doesn't understand." "What's that?" "Love. Real love, not possession or dominance or the need to prove something. Love that makes you better, not weaker." The night before the challenge, Dale found himself unable to sleep. He stood at the window of their apartment, looking out at the city lights and thinking about how much his life had changed. 2 years ago, he had been hiding behind professional boundaries and telling himself that contentment was enough. Now he was preparing to watch the man he loved fight for their future. "Can't sleep either?" Marvin's voice came from behind him. "Too much to think about," Dale said, not turning around. Marvin came to stand beside him at the window, his presence warm and solid. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything. The challenge, the pack, what happens if things go wrong." "Things won't go wrong. You don't know that." "I know that I have something worth fighting for," Marvin said, echoing Dale's words from their walk. "I know that I'm not the same man who would have faced this challenge 5 years ago. I'm stronger now, because of you." Dale finally turned to look at him. "I'm scared." "So am I," Marvin admitted. "But I'm also angry. Marcus thinks he can take everything we've built, everything we've chosen. He thinks that being an alpha gives him the right to destroy what he doesn't understand. Show him he's wrong. I intend to." The challenge took place in the ancient amphitheater that had been built specifically for such events, carved into the hillside that overlooked the city. Representatives from dozens of packs had come to witness the combat, their presence a reminder of how much was at stake. Dale sat in the section reserved for the challenged alpha's inner circle, surrounded by pack members who looked to him for reassurance he wasn't sure he could provide. Below in the arena, Marvin stood across from Marcus Silverpeak, both men stripped to the waist, their bodies marked with the ritual scars that indicated their readiness to fight. "Alphas," the elder officiating the challenge called out, her voice carrying clearly through the amphitheater. "State your claims." Marcus stepped forward first, his voice booming with confidence. "I challenge Marvin Blackthorn for leadership of the Northern Ice Pack, for his failure to maintain proper alpha dominance, for his weakness in choosing a beta as his primary advisor, and for his refusal to honor traditional pack alliances." The crowd murmured at the formal accusations. Dale felt his hands clench into fists, but he kept his expression neutral. This was exactly what they had expected. Marvin's response was quieter but no less forceful. "I reject these challenges as baseless and motivated by personal grievance rather than legitimate concern for pack welfare. I stand ready to defend my leadership and my choices." "Then let combat begin," the elder announced. The fight was brutal and swift. Marcus was younger and larger, but Marvin was faster and more experienced. Dale watched with his heart in his throat as the two alphas circled each other, looking for openings, testing defenses. Marcus struck first, a powerful blow that would have felled a lesser opponent. But Marvin rolled with the impact, using Marcus's momentum against him. The counterattack was precise and devastating, targeting pressure points that Dale recognized from his own research. Within minutes, it was over. Marcus lay unconscious in the dirt, and Marvin stood over him, bloodied but victorious. "The challenge is decided," the elder announced. "Marvin Blackthorn remains alpha of the Northern Ice Pack." The cheers from their pack members were deafening, but Dale barely heard them. All his attention was focused on Marvin, who was looking up at him with an expression of triumph and exhaustion. Later, after the formal ceremonies and the celebration feast, Dale and Marvin finally found themselves alone in their apartment. Marvin's injuries had been treated, but he was still moving carefully, his body showing the effects of the fight. "How do you feel?" Dale asked, helping him settle onto the couch. "Like I got hit by a truck," Marvin said with a weary smile. "But victorious. Definitely victorious. You were amazing down there. The way you handled Marcus's attacks, the countermoves you used. It was like watching a master at work." "I had good research support," Marvin said, pulling Dale down beside him. "And something worth fighting for. The pack. You. Everything we've built together." Dale felt his chest tighten with emotion. "I was so scared I was going to lose you. You're not getting rid of me that easily," Marvin said, his arm tightening around Dale's shoulders. "We're partners, remember? In everything." "In everything," Dale agreed, settling against Marvin's side. The victory over Marcus Silverpeak marked the beginning of a new era for Northern Ice. Other packs, seeing that challenges to Marvin's authority would be met with decisive action, began approaching them with offers of alliance rather than threats of conquest. The pack's territory expanded, their influence grew, and their prosperity increased. But the most significant change was in Dale and Marvin's relationship. The challenge had forced them to confront the possibility of loss, to acknowledge how much they meant to each other beyond their professional partnership. "I want to make this official," Marvin said one evening 6 months after the challenge. They were in their office, reviewing reports from their newest territory acquisitions, when he suddenly set down his papers and looked at Dale with unusual intensity. "Make what official?" Dale asked, though he suspected he knew what Marvin meant. "Us, our partnership. I want to go through the formal bonding ceremony." Dale felt his heart skip a beat. Bonding was the supernatural equivalent of marriage, a ritual that created permanent psychic and emotional connections between partners. It was rare for alphas and betas to bond, not because it was forbidden, but because the power dynamics made it complicated. "Marvin," Dale said carefully, "bonding is permanent. Once it's done, it can't be undone." "I know that. It means you'll feel everything I feel, and I'll feel everything you feel. There won't be any hiding, any professional distance, any way to separate our personal and professional lives." "I'm counting on it," Marvin said seriously. "Dale, I've spent the last 3 years learning how to be with you as an equal, how to love you without trying to dominate you. The bonding ceremony won't change that. If anything, it will make it stronger, because you'll be able to feel for yourself that I see you as my equal." Dale was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. Bonding would change everything between them, would make their connection deeper and more permanent than any marriage contract. But it would also be the ultimate proof that Marvin truly saw him as an equal partner. "Yes," Dale said finally. "Yes. Yes, I want to bond with you. I want that connection, that permanence. I want to know that what we have is real and lasting." Marvin's smile was brilliant. "When?" "Traditional bonding ceremonies happen during the new moon," Dale said, his mind already working through the logistics. "That's 2 weeks away." 2 weeks to plan a bonding ceremony," Marvin said, sounding slightly overwhelmed. "That's not much time." "We don't need much," Dale said. "Just us, the pack elders to officiate, and our closest friends and family. The ceremony itself is simple. Simple but significant." "Very significant," Dale agreed. The 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Word of the upcoming bonding spread through the pack and beyond, generating excitement and curiosity in equal measure. Alpha-beta bondings were unusual enough to be noteworthy, but the fact that it was their alpha and his trusted advisor made it even more significant. "Are you nervous?" Henry asked when Dale stopped by the bookstore a few days before the ceremony. The older man had become something of a confidant over the years, and Dale valued his perspective. "Terrified," Dale admitted, "but in a good way, I think." "What are you afraid of?" "That I won't be enough. That once we're bonded, once Marvin can feel everything I feel, he'll realize that I'm not as strong or as confident as I pretend to be." Henry chuckled. "You think he doesn't already know that? You think he's been fooled by your professional facade for all these years?" "Maybe. Dale, that man has been in love with you since before he knew what love was. He's seen you at your best and your worst, and he chose you anyway. The bonding isn't going to change that." "But what if?" "What if nothing?" Henry said firmly. "You're spiraling and it's not helpful. The bonding ceremony will formalize what already exists between you. It won't create new feelings or reveal hidden truths. It will just make your connection official and permanent." "You're right," Dale said, taking a deep breath. "I'm overthinking this." "You always overthink things. It's one of your most endearing qualities." The night of the bonding ceremony was clear and cold, with stars visible despite the city lights. The ceremony took place in the pack's sacred grove, a small wooded area that had been preserved within their territory for exactly this kind of ritual. Dale stood at one end of the ceremonial circle, wearing traditional robes that had been passed down through generations of pack members. Marvin stood at the opposite end, similarly dressed, his expression serious but joyful. Between them, the pack elders had prepared the ritual elements. a silver bowl filled with spring water, herbs that had been blessed under previous full moons, and the ancient words that would bind them together permanently. Marvin Blackthorn, the eldest of the elders, began, her voice carrying clearly through the grove. Do you come to this bonding freely, without coercion or expectation of gain? I do, Marvin said, his voice steady. Do you offer yourself as equal partner to Dale Winters, accepting him as he is, promising to honor his autonomy and cherish his trust? I do. The elder turned to Dale. Dale Winters, do you come to this bonding freely, without fear or reservation? I do, Dale said, surprised by how calm his voice sounded. Do you offer yourself as equal partner to Marvin Blackthorn, accepting him as he is, promising to honor his leadership and cherish his protection? I do. Then step forward and join hands. Dale moved to the center of the circle, his heart pounding. Marvin met him there, their hands clasping together over the silver bowl. The water within began to glow with soft light, responding to their combined presence. Speak your vows, the elder instructed. Marvin went first, his eyes locked on Dale's face. I vow to love you as my equal, to choose you every day for the rest of my life. I vow to honor your strength, to support your dreams, and to stand beside you through whatever challenges we face. I vow to be your partner in all things, your refuge in times of trouble, and your celebration in times of joy. Dale felt tears prick at his eyes, but his voice was steady when he responded. I vow to love you without reservation, to trust you completely, to challenge you when you need challenging and support you when you need supporting. I vow to be your partner in leadership, your counsel in difficult decisions, and your comfort in times of doubt. I vow to choose you, every day, for all the days of my life. The elder raised her hands, and the other pack members began to sing, their voices blending in harmonies that seemed to resonate through the earth itself. Dale felt something shifting inside him, a warmth spreading from his chest outward, connecting him to Marvin in ways he had never experienced before. By the authority vested in me by this pack and by traditions older than memory, the elder declared, I declare you bonded partners in all things, equals in love and life. The moment the words were spoken, Dale felt the full force of the bond settling into place. Suddenly, he could feel Marvin's emotions as clearly as his own. Love, joy, relief, and a deep sense of rightness that resonated through every fiber of his being. I can feel you, Marvin whispered, wonder in his voice. I can feel you too, Dale replied, marveling at the sensation. This is incredible. The celebration that followed was joyful and chaotic, with pack members offering congratulations and gifts, toasts being made, and music filling the grove. But Dale was only dimly aware of the festivities. All his attention was focused on the new connection between him and Marvin, the constant awareness of his partner's presence and emotions. How does it feel? Marvin asked during a quiet moment between conversations with well-wishers. Like coming home, Dale said honestly. Like everything finally makes sense.
No regrets.
None. You. Only that we waited so long to do this. Later that night, alone in their apartment, they lay in bed exploring the new dimensions of their relationship. The bond allowed them to share not just emotions but thoughts and sensations, creating an intimacy that was both thrilling and overwhelming. I love you, Marvin murmured against Dale's skin, and Dale could feel the truth of those words, not just hear them. I love you too, Dale replied, sending the emotion through their bond so that Marvin could experience it directly. They made love with a tenderness and intensity that neither had ever experienced before, the bond amplifying every touch, every sensation, every moment of connection. When it was over, they lay entwined, both of them marveling at how much their relationship had deepened in a single evening. What happens now? Dale asked, his head resting on Marvin's chest. Now we build our life together, Marvin said, his hand running through Dale's hair. We lead the pack, we grow our territory, we face whatever challenges come our way, but we do it all together, as true partners. I like the sound of that. So do I. The months following their bonding brought new challenges and new opportunities. The psychic connection between them made their professional partnership even more effective, allowing them to communicate without words during negotiations and to anticipate each other's needs during complex situations. Other packs began to take notice of Northern Ice's increased effectiveness, and requests for alliance and partnership began pouring in. Dale found himself traveling more frequently, representing the pack at interterritorial conferences and diplomatic gatherings. The Moonridge Pack wants to discuss a mutual defense pact, Dale said one evening, reviewing the latest batch of correspondence. Their alpha specifically requested that I handle the negotiations. That's the third request this month, Marvin observed, looking up from his own paperwork. You're developing quite a reputation as a negotiator. It helps that I have insider knowledge of how alphas think, Dale said with a slight smile. Thanks to our bond, I can feel when someone is being deceptive or when they're genuinely interested in cooperation. Useful skill. Very useful. Though I have to be careful not to let them know that's what I'm doing. Their bond had indeed made Dale a more effective negotiator, but it had also created new complexities in their relationship. Being able to feel each other's emotions constantly meant that there was no hiding, no pretending, no maintaining the kind of professional distance that had once characterized their interactions. We need to talk about the Westfield situation, Dale said one evening, setting down his phone after a particularly difficult call. What about it? Marvin asked, though Dale could feel through their bond that he already suspected what the conversation would be about. They're offering us access to their coastal territories in exchange for military support against the Redwood Pack. It's a good deal, strategically speaking. But supporting them means going to war. Real war, not just territorial disputes or formal challenges.
People will die.
Marvin was quiet for a moment, and Dale could feel the conflict in his emotions. The strategic advantages of the Westfield alliance were clear, but the moral implications were troubling. What do you think we should do? Marvin asked. I think we should find a third option, Dale said. Something that gives us what we need without requiring us to participate in unnecessary violence. Such as mediation. We offer to mediate the dispute between Westfield and Redwood. If we can broker a peace agreement, both packs will owe us favors, and we'll have access to both territories. Marvin's expression brightened as he considered the proposal. That could work. It would position us as peacemakers rather than aggressors. Exactly, and it would set a precedent for how we handle future conflicts. The mediation was successful, establishing Northern Ice as a neutral party capable of resolving disputes between other packs. The reputation brought them new opportunities for trade and alliance, and their territory continued to expand through negotiation rather than conquest. You realize what we've done? Marvin said one evening as they reviewed maps showing their expanded influence. Built an empire? Dale suggested. Created a new model for pack leadership. Instead of ruling through dominance and fear, we're leading through competence and diplomacy. And it's working. It's working because we're doing it together, because we balance each other out. Dale looked at the maps, at the evidence of everything they had accomplished in the 5 years since he had walked away from his position as Marvin's assistant. The growth was impressive, but what mattered more was how they had achieved it. Do you ever miss the old days? Dale asked. When things were simpler? Do you mean when you were hiding behind professional boundaries and I was too stupid to realize I was in love with you? Marvin asked with a laugh. No, I don't miss that at all. Even though things are more complicated now. Especially because things are more complicated now. Complicated means we're living real lives, making real choices, building something meaningful together. True. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a courier, bringing news that would test their partnership in ways they hadn't anticipated. The Supernatural Council, the governing body that oversaw all pack territories, was calling for a formal review of Northern Ice's expansion and methods. This is about Marcus Silverpeak, Dale said after reading the official notification. He's filed a formal complaint, claiming that our diplomatic methods are undermining traditional pack hierarchy. Of course he has, Marvin said with disgust. He can't accept being beaten in formal combat, so now he's trying to use politics to get what he couldn't win through strength. The review is serious, Marvin. If the council finds that our methods are destabilizing the traditional pack structure, they could order us to relinquish our newer territories. Let them try, Marvin growled, his alpha instincts flaring. Dale placed a calming hand on his arm, using their bond to project soothing emotions. Getting angry won't help. We need to prepare our case, show them that our methods are actually strengthening the pack system, not undermining it. How do we do that? We show them the results. Lower conflict rates in our territories, improved economic conditions for all the packs we've allied with, successful resolution of disputes that might otherwise have led to wars. The next few weeks were spent in intensive preparation for the council review. Dale compiled statistics and testimonials, while Marvin coordinated with their allies to ensure they would speak on Northern Ice's behalf. The review itself took place in the council's ancient meeting hall, a cavernous stone chamber that had witnessed centuries of pack politics. Representatives from dozens of packs filled the gallery, all eager to see whether Northern Ice's innovative approach would be validated or condemned. Alpha Blackthorn, the council's senior member, began. You stand accused of undermining traditional pack hierarchy through your unconventional methods of expansion and your choice of a beta as your primary advisor and bonded partner. I reject those accusations, Marvin replied, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Northern Ice has grown stronger under our current leadership structure, and our territories are more prosperous and peaceful than they have ever been. But at what cost? Marcus Silverpeak interjected from the gallery. Traditional alpha dominance is the foundation of pack society. When alphas begin treating betas as equals, the entire system is threatened. Dale felt Marvin's anger spike through their bond, but he squeezed his partner's hand, reminding him to stay calm. Traditional alpha dominance, Dale said, standing to address the council, assumes that strength and wisdom are the same thing. But leadership requires more than the ability to dominate. It requires the ability to listen, to adapt, to find solutions that benefit everyone rather than just the strongest. You speak of leadership as if you have authority here, one of the council members observed. But you are beta. What gives you the right to address this council as an equal? The same thing that gives any of you the right, Dale replied evenly. Competence, experience, and the trust of those I serve. Betas exist to serve alphas, Marcus called out. That is the natural order. The natural order, Marvin said, rising to stand beside Dale, is whatever works best for the survival and prosperity of the pack. And what works best for Northern Ice is partnership between equals, regardless of their designations. The debate continued for hours, with speakers arguing both sides of the issue. But eventually, the council called for testimony from the packs that had been directly affected by Northern Ice's policies. One by one, alpha after alpha stood to speak about the benefits they had experienced from working with Dale and Marvin. Lower conflict rates, successful mediations, economic prosperity, and peaceful resolution of disputes that might otherwise have led to bloodshed. The evidence is clear, the senior council member said finally. While Northern Ice's methods may be unconventional, their results speak for themselves. Pack territories under their influence show marked improvements in stability, prosperity, and inter-pack cooperation. Furthermore, another council member added, their bonding demonstrates that partnership between alphas and betas can strengthen rather than weaken pack leadership. The final vote was closer than Dale had hoped, but it was decisive. Northern Ice's methods were officially approved, and their territorial claims were validated. Marcus Silverpeak's complaint is dismissed, the senior council member announced. Northern Ice will continue to operate under their current leadership structure. The celebration that night was subdued, both Dale and Marvin exhausted by the stress of the review. But as they sat in their hotel room, sharing a quiet dinner, Dale felt a deep sense of satisfaction. We did it, he said simply. We did, Marvin agreed. Though I have to admit, there were moments when I thought we might lose everything. Did you ever doubt that we were doing the right thing? Never, Marvin said immediately. Even when it was difficult, even when it would have been easier to go back to the old ways, I never doubted that our partnership was the right choice. Good, Dale said, leaning against Marvin's shoulder. Because I'm not going anywhere. Promise. I promise. We're bonded, remember? You're stuck with me for life. Best fate I can imagine, Marvin said, pressing a kiss to the top of Dale's head. 5 years later, Dale stood in the same grove where they had bonded, watching as another couple prepared for their own ceremony. The groom was an alpha from a neighboring pack, the bride a beta who had earned her position through competence rather than bloodline. It was becoming more common, this idea that love and partnership mattered more than traditional hierarchies. They look happy, Marvin observed, coming to stand beside Dale. They look terrified, Dale corrected with a smile. But happy terrified. I remember that feeling. Do you regret it? Any of it? Marvin turned to look at him, his expression serious. Regret loving you? Regret bonding with you? Regret building this life together? Regret giving up the simplicity of traditional alpha dominance? Dale, Marvin said, taking his hands. I was never a traditional alpha. I was a lonely, driven man who thought power meant control. You taught me that real power comes from partnership, from trust, from choosing to build something together rather than trying to dominate. And I learned that being strong doesn't mean being alone, Dale replied. That accepting love doesn't make you weak. We've come a long way from that first day when you walked into my office. We have, Dale agreed, and we have the rest of our lives to see how much further we can go. As the ceremony began, Dale felt their bond humming with contentment and anticipation. They had built something remarkable together, something that challenged conventions and created new possibilities. But more than that, they had found in each other the perfect balance of ice and fire, strength and wisdom, leadership and partnership. I love you, Marvin murmured. The words carried not just by sound, but by the deep emotional connection that linked them permanently. I love you too, Dale replied, meaning it with every fiber of his being. Always and forever. The ceremony concluded with the traditional blessing, and the new couple sealed their bond with a kiss that drew cheers from their assembled friends and family. As Dale and Marvin walked back toward their car, hands intertwined, Dale reflected on how perfectly everything had worked out. What are you thinking about? Marvin asked, sensing his contemplation through their bond. Just how different our lives are now compared to when we first met. How much we've both changed and grown. Good changes. The best changes, Dale said firmly. We're better together than we ever were apart. Partners in everything, Marvin said, echoing the vows they had made years earlier. Partners in everything, Dale agreed, squeezing Marvin's hand. As they drove home through the city they had helped shape and protect, Dale felt a deep sense of peace. They had found their balance, their rhythm, their place in the world. And whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them the same way they had faced everything else. Together, as equals, as partners who had chosen each other freely and would continue choosing each other every day for the rest of their lives. The future stretched out before them, full of possibilities and promises, and Dale knew that whatever it brought, they would meet it together, ice and fire in perfect harmony, creating something stronger and more beautiful than either could achieve alone.